Should I switch that light off or keep that light on?
Hang on a second. So it's streaming.
Light off?
No, it's fine. It's okay. So it looks like we're online already. And so hi, I'm Jenny Klochko. You're watching my live stream on my podcast, and as I was very surprised, as many of you mentioned in the comments and the video of my book recommendations, the book of John Sweeney, Killing the Kremlin, is a very good friend of mine, very loud friend. So as he kindly agreed to join me today on live streaming to talk about the book and go back in the memories and the context, how this substantial book was written. So, but before we actually go into the book discussion of the book, I would like to go with John on a few current events. Hi, John. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Hi, I'm going to be as quiet as possible.
Oh yeah.
Down the intro, where I'm somehow loud. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Still can. Okay. So, John, direct question, and I expected for a direct answer. Do you think Elon Musk lost his mind, as his biographer stated?
Yes, I do. I feel that he's exposed himself to be some kind of manic depressive who has tremendous spells of energy, and it's incoherent nonsense, much of it. I particularly find pretty bloody awful what he's doing at the moment, which is undermining democracies, for example, in Germany and in Britain, while at the same time being utterly uncritical of dictatorships in China and Russia. Now, he's got business in China. They make his car, the Tesla, and in Russia he wants to deals with them. And both countries have got lots of money, but they're morally disgusting, and there's something quite wrong about his moral compass. I'm not sure he's got any morality whatsoever, but the stuff he's been saying about the Asian grooming gangs, now this is a serious problem, but it's been dealt with seriously. Government has acted. There's been a whole series of trials, and by the way, Tommy Robinson tanked, or almost tanked, one of those trials, which meant that the young girls who were affected, who were the victims, would have to have given evidence all over again. And actually that was avoided, but no thanks to Tommy Robinson. So the idea that he's got a point, no, he hasn't, on this. But what he is doing is attacking America's great allies, great historic allies, on the basis of far-right racist nonsense. So, by the way, Jenny, you would get this. You've seen the video, haven't you, of Vladimir Putin kissing the little boy on the stomach outside the Kremlin?
Well, we will get to that. On Elon Musk, you see, it's difficult to comprehend how he behaves and what he says, but at the same time, as arrogant and one of the sort of top people with the biggest ego possible. And it feels like he not just disrespecting the politicians or the current world order, he manifesting it. And I'm just wondering, is it because he lost his mind, as it was mentioned, or he, as a businessman, and probably who was bribing politicians and understanding all the cost of this, making life better or making country great or great again. So maybe he's one of those who's trying to shake the world and changing the world order like many others naughty boys on the global scene.
Well, the problem is, so listen, he's the world's richest man, and that gives him an awful lot of power, and he controls, or he owns Twitter, and he's changing the algorithms. Essentially, I'm seeing far more of Elon Musk on my timeline than before, and I'm seeing far more far right stuff than the time before. But he's not an elected politician, and what he's trying to do, it seems, is to upset, turn over, pretty much destroy the democratic principle.
Yeah.
In our countries, you hold power through the ballot box. You get the voters to vote for you, and then you get. Now, obviously, America's just voted for Donald Trump, so and Elon Musk was a massive supporter. But because America has voted for Trump, by the way, narrowly, not by some massive landslide, but narrowly, does not give Elon Musk, who's never been elected to anything, the right to interfere in British democracy or German democracy, as he's been doing. And now he's also he's supporting Trump's nonsense about Greenland and Canada.
What do you think of these statements, basically?
You know, Jenny, on the one hand, it's comical. On the other hand, I'm going to take a drink because it's the only way.
John, think of your liver.
By the way, orange hat, orange in the drink. If anyone's interested, it's a gin and tonic because I think it helps fight the malaria. You're looking back some Ukrainian gorilka, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's the amount of Ukrainian gorilka we all drink.
I don't think you're telling me the truth there because it's viscous. Because gorilka, it's pretty viscous. And
John,
and that
Ukrainian
like
wine in Lidl. I was just recently saw the post. One of the Ukrainian girls in the UK, posted some Ukrainian wine. I think it's Sapiravi, made in Ukraine.
Oh, fantastic!
It's in Lidl, so.
Oh, okay. I'm going to Lidl right now. To be honest, I'm not. Anyway, no, fantastic. By the way, Sapiravi wine it's a Georgian grape, I think, or something like
it is.
But it's made in Ukraine, and it's wonderful. That's water, Jenny, and don't pretend otherwise. You can tell because I know this stuff. Anyway, I think that Trump. So here's the problem: is in relation to Ukraine, which I know more about. You've got this new General Kellogg, who is saying things which are not terrible. I argue with some of the premises, or the big premise is simple, is that countries should not be able to invade other countries and steal their land. And that is the principle Britain went to war against the Kaiser's Germany in 1914, and why we went to war with Hitler's Germany in 1939. And, obviously there's been invasions and bits and pieces around, but never on the point of we're now going to steal this land. So what Putin did in 2014 and then again more bigly, as Trump would say, in 2022 against Ukraine is wrong. The problem is that what Trump seems to be now is absorbing Putinism, and Trump's becoming Putinist. Okay, so it's not a problem for Putin to take Ukraine. It is a problem that I haven't got Greenland, so I'm going to take Greenland. Greenland currently is part of Denmark, and the idea that Trump thinks this is a good idea feels quite crazy to me. What's very hard to work out is Kellogg's plan, the 100-day plan he's advanced, is not bad for Ukraine, but what's in charge? Because it sounds like that Trump in his gut is not supporting Ukraine. So what's the reigning policy? Is it what Trump says?
We don't know. We don't know if he's supporting Ukraine, because what I noticed, it's like with every meeting with Zelensky, Trump, his perception of peace negotiation is adjusting. You remember at the very beginning of election campaign, he was talking about hours. Then it's stretched to 24 hours. Then after the latest meeting with Zelensky, now he's talking 6 months, or the first half of the year of 2025. So we don't really know what he's doing. And the other thing, which is slightly, when you mentioned Trump become Putinist or something like that, you see, it's just like, let's not fool ourselves. Putin is not the force here. If Putin knew that Xi Jinping is not going to back him up, he would never invade Ukraine, because his own resources finished after 7-8 months. Now he's struggling technologically, money-wise, manpower, many other things. So he's not really the force. So he's this Xi Jinping. He's the force behind it at the moment. And as long as they sort of strong chemistry, they can carry on. If they carry on.
I don't think Xi Jinping has wanted Putin to invade Ukraine and for it take this long for him to succeed. So but it's true that China is more or less supporting Russia. There are some caveats in that fear of American sanctions has stayed China's hand. Now, a big question is Trump going to continue with those sanctions? And is Trump in particular going to continue with the American economic support for the Ukrainian economy? So, for example, pretty much when you go to, the pound bounces around and it's going down at the moment, but when you go to Kyiv, you can see that you get roughly the same amount of money every time. Now, obviously, Ukraine's suffering economically massively, and that's because the Western democracies have been supporting Ukraine's economy and its currency and keeping its value higher than it should be. But this helps Ukraine a lot in terms of stability, in terms of it carrying on doing the businesses and what it manages to sell, including beautiful Saperavi wine to the West. I think if I keep on doing adverts, I might get a free bottle. Who knows? Anyway,
I might have sponsorship from Lidl. I'll invite you to my Mayfair house for the party.
I can hear them knocking on the door. But to be honest, Jenny, I'm a waitress man. However, I will ask them, where's the Saperavi wine? But if Trump gets in, a very easy thing he could do for him to put pressure on the Ukrainians to sign a deal they don't want to is to pull the plug on the economic support that the Americans and everybody else have been giving. Yeah. And I worry about that because Trump sees the world entirely transactionally. There is some reason for optimism, but it's obviously qualified, and it goes like this: that Trump is he wants to seem strong. He likes seeming strong. He doesn't like seeming weak. He had a real go at Joe Biden because of the humiliating exit from Afghanistan. By the way, Trump did a deal with the Taliban, which made staying in Afghanistan much harder for Biden. But I think, and a lot of people agree, that Biden screwed up. America looked weak with the exit from Afghanistan.
It was an embarrassing moment.
If Trump gives Putin everything he wants, then Ukraine will become Donald Trump's version of Joe Biden's Afghanistan, and I don't think he'll like that. Now, the problem with Trump is that you're dealing with somebody with the emotional intelligence of a toddler.
I like his linguistic vocabulary.
No, he is a toddler. I mean, I write about this in my book, Killer in the Kremlin, and I interviewed an American.
We're just about to talk about Killer in the Kremlin.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm jumping ahead, but you're dealing with a toddler. But at the moment, the toddler is very angry with the Democrats. So he's saying Biden's wrong, Biden supported the Ukrainians. Actually, you can make a very good argument that Biden didn't support the Ukrainians anything like enough. So that if Trump is truly anti-Biden, a good policy for him is to support Ukraine properly against Russia.
Hopefully.
But that's wishful thinking. For the moment, the mood music isn't good. The mood music is from Trump You know, Russia was afraid of NATO moving east. NATO moved east, therefore the West kind of betrayed Russia. This is nonsense. And Russia, and remember, NATO is a defensive shield. So it's a defensive shield against murderers. It doesn't go and invade countries. It doesn't blast houses, kill children, all of those things. The Russian army does, no question at all. So, what is Trump going to do? The problem for me, what I think is going to happen is Trump is going to side with Putin for a bit, and it'll be bad. It'll be bad for Ukraine, and the question is how many Ukrainians are going to die until such time as Putin realizes this looks bad for him. Now, Biden's gone. His real enemy now is not Biden, it's Vladimir Putin. And if it looks as though Vladimir Putin sort of gets some kind of victory, then America will look weak and Trump won't like that. There's a particular thing. Did you see Russian 60 Minutes
No.
on Russia 1 on November the 7th? Jenny?
No, I'm getting ill every time when I watched Russian TV if I had to, or listen to Putin.
On it, and this is essentially the first proper day after Russia understands that Trump's won. 60 Minutes, whatever it's called in Russian, does a whole feature on Melania Trump when she was a soft porn model, and she modeled for GQ magazine.
Something he would be very much interested. It's
all very tasteful, but you do see Melania's naked body. In plain English, her tits and her bum. How? They go on about it at great length. The presenters going, woo, 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 you know, and there's a point where you go, what's going on here? Now, the Russian TV is completely patsy. They're never going to do this unless someone in the Kremlin, almost certainly Putin himself, has said, do this.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing here is the humiliation of Trump's wife by Russian TV, state-controlled TV, on the effectively the day after he's been elected. So, what's going on there? Now, what I think is that isn't a sign of strength, but a sign of weakness.
Well, they're desperate.
I want Trump to know, the Kremlin wants Trump to know, we've got sex compromise on Trump's missus. Hint, 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 we've also got stuff on you. You behave. But the problem is that Putin likes doing this. Obviously, he also uses poison and bullets against his enemies, but he also sexually compromates them. He sexually compromised Yuri Skaratov in 1998.
It's more KGB tactics.
Yes.
And
so
it was Soviet Union basically built its foreign and internal policies building on this. This is how they deal.
So this looks like sex compromise against Trump through his wife, but hinting at we've got stuff on you. By the way, I think it's very likely they may have stuff on him because Trump's a sexaholic in the way that his brother Fred was an alcoholic. Now, but I don't think it'll work in that Trump's from Queen, and we all know about his affair with Stormy Daniels, and there are many other women, etc., etc., etc. That's one thing. But to appear to disrespect Trump's wife, that's not a good thing to do. It's not smart. Trump will hate it.
I think it is a part of sending the message. It's like big manifestation of it. Sort of like this is sort of, you know, when usually in the films when they use sort of blackmail to get the money, so they drop off something light and then getting harder if you don't get the message, and then harder. John, before we actually start talking about your book, that was the whole point of meeting us tonight. Quick what's your take on President Zelensky interview for so-called American podcast, which is absolutely Russian guy there with the strange narratives? I'll say what resonated with me greatly. Do you remember? I don't know.
What's his name again? It's Friedman, or what's his name? It's Lex. Anyway, he's kind of weirdo.
Yeah.
Stupid, very, very Russian. I mean, the Kremlin narrative, albeit from an American direction. But what was good about it was that Zelensky had to come out fighting. So most of the time, the people who interviewed Zelensky give him an easy time. And this guy it was myth that Zelensky wouldn't talk in Russian. He put forward a number of silly things that people like Trump say. And it matters what Trump says because he's about to become the most powerful person in the world again. But Zelensky came out fighting and had to say in simple terms, listen, son, it works like, they invaded us twice and we're a different country now. And the idea that they kind of own us, that's nonsensical. So I thought it was, although I was irritated by the US host, I thought it was a good thing because it kind of pushed Zelensky to talk in plain language about why Ukraine is fighting this war, and that came out very strongly. I mean, Zelensky is a great communicator.
He is, and when I watched it, I had the sense of this next door guy. The one I remember him since he was on this comedy show, before when they were all young and they were going on this contents and doing the sketches and everything. But there's one thing resonated with me greatly when he was talking when the war started, and he off to the office and told his wife, like, you take care of kids and sort of like, and I need to go. And he was saying sort of like, you need to be less a father to your children, but more sort of like taking care of the family as a country. And this is a moment when I think it's just by that time he already clicked as a statesman, as a person who is thinking those categories. And this resonated with me as well, because since the full-scale invasion started, there's nothing, no as a sort of mother or wife or anything hits me harder as the war in Ukraine. And it's actually as this full-scale invasion stole the joy of Christmas, birthdays, anything. For me, it's just like, one long day, which is almost 3 years older. Yes, so before we switch into fantastic book, I would like us to watch one video, John. So don't stop yourself. You can be emotional. Just no heart attacks. But just go with it. Let the memories start. Are we?
What is the essence of the tragedy that is happening now in Ukraine? I think the main reason is that the Kyiv authorities do not want to conduct substantive political dialogue with the east of the country. And now is the beginning of a very important process, in my view, the process of direct negotiations. We have been working on it for a long time and agreed with President Poroshenko in Minsk. Such contacts are starting now.
John?
Yes, what a killer in the Kremlin. Yeah. Well, what's annoying about by the way, that's a BBC clip, which is actually very, very short, didn't have my question, which was, what about the killings in Ukraine? Not just the Ukrainians and the Russians, but also the Dutch, the Australians, the British. I'm talking about MH17. And Putin, he slides away, as he always does, and gives a long and boring answer blaming the Ukrainians for something he did, which was that he supplied a Russian Buk missile, which the Russians, they left the critical radio or radar part behind. They had a small radar that normally travels with a much bigger radar. They left that behind on the other side, the Russian side of the river. crossed on a pontoon. Excuse me, the whole unit was too big to get across the river, so they left the radar behind, and that meant that they didn't have proper sight to what they were looking at. They thought they saw a Ukrainian fighter jet. They fired the missile, and actually it was a Boeing full of holidaymakers going from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, and 298 people died. I went out to that crash site in Donetsk, east of Donetsk, and I saw the dead bodies being dumped into a lorry, and I saw the seats, and I saw the plane wings and the engines and the nose cone, and I saw people's paperbacks and ladies' hats. And worst of all, Jenny, there's these little trunkies that toddlers are carried along by mum and dad of Gatwick and stuff. And every time to this day, when I see one of those, I well up, because 298 people were murdered, 10 of them British, 100 Dutch, many Australians, and Putin and the Russians were responsible. If you look at the Bellingcat stuff, look at the Dutch fantastic inquiry into all. There's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Putin is directly responsible for supplying that missile, giving it to those idiots and who were working for him. They made a horrible mistake. They didn't mean to do it, but what happened was they killed 298 people. This is a huge act of terrorism by the Russian state. By the way, after that interview, what happened is that a couple of hours later, some thug came up to me and hit me in the stomach. Bang, like that. Now, they didn't like my question.
They didn't. But think about it now. Thank goodness they didn't do anything worse. You know, it was just like comparing to everything they did, you know, with the poisoning, with everything. So you actually been very lucky to have just punch in your stomach, and you survived.
I was working for the BBC, and I just asked Putin a very rude question. Almost, it's very, very unusual to be able to sort of confront him in that way. So I think they knew if I suddenly sort of like died of a heart attack, it would look too suspicious. And remember, this was still 2014.
Yeah, it's actually our first film together, isn't it?
Yes, indeed it was. Yes. So everybody should know Jenny helped produce that film, and what was it called? I forget which, but anyway, we had a real go at Putin,
We did.
and there was a real difference, by the way, how I can remember colleagues from the BBC Ukrainian service sort of going up and shaking my hand and buying me beers and everything like this. And colleagues from the BBC Russia service were less enthusiastic, I think.
Oh, I wonder why. I wonder.
There was a problem because Putin exists in a kind of bubble where it's very, very rare for someone like me to be able to get to him.
Do you remember you were lucky actually to have this question, because all the media were moved somewhere further and they just mistook you for the professor, wasn't it?
Yes, I was pretending to be a professor of... We met in a mammoth museum in Yakutsk in Siberia, and I pretended to be a professor of mammothology. I mean, I tell the story in the book of an almost disaster, which is... it's a long way from London to Yakutsk. It's 9 time zones east of London. It's further east than Beijing. It's almost in Alaska. And there was no food on the Moscow-Yakutsk leg of the flight. And I was starving. I'd been to my niece's wedding. I was hungover. I was wearing the kind of suit I wore to the wedding with a bit of kind of red wine on the shirt and everything like this. So I looked like a professor of mammothology, but the moment I got off the plane, the producer said, "We got no time. I need a kebab. We stop. I wolf a kebab, and stuff it down me. And then I get there. No one quite asks me who I am. I look like a professor of mammothology, and I stand there with all the other professors, And when Putin, when he walks like a pimp, he kind of in a nightclub, he sort of walks up the steps.
All heavens die hard.
and I jump in front of the real professors, and I go, John Sweeney from BBC Panorama, President Putin, what about the killings in Ukraine? And anyway, he gives this long, boring answer. The clip you just saw was 30 seconds, of like 5, 6, 7 minutes of him gassing on. And towards the end of it, it felt hot in there. And the TV lights, but there was something else, Jenny. There was something wrong with the kebab. And it started sort of coming up my stomach. And then there's this awful sense of me going, oh God, I'm going to go, yeah, all over Vladimir Putin. And I thought, hey, here's the positive. I'd never have to buy a beer in Kyiv ever again.
Yeah, that's the biggest regret, John. But thank goodness for your health. You wouldn't survive that. The gratitude.
But I think it would have been cool, the man who vomited over Vladimir Putin. I think
you would make history. But John, you're a respectable journalist. You're a respectable journalist. Enough screaming in the Hollywood. You would be vomiting on Vladimir Putin. It's like, come on. You report on serious stuff. Look, about the book. So you wrote, as I was going back to the book, and looking through it, and you saying in the book that you wrote the book to understand why Putin has started war against Ukraine. So did you actually? I understand the story with the killer until killer has disappeared accidentally or purposely. I think the story is going on. So do you go back in your thoughts with this sort of like, because Putin is not getting younger and everyone's holding fingers crossed for his days to be over. So is your sort of like answer on the question why he invaded Ukraine, why he started these atrocities, why he keeps doing it, are they changing, or basically you're just like supporting your initial first original answer on this question?
So Putin goes his honeymoon with his first wife. He goes on honeymoon where? He goes to Odessa. He goes to Kyiv. And he has secret policeman's spectacles from around when he joined the KGB. What is this, 75, something like this? So Brezhnev is still in power, more or less. And Putin sees the world with the absolutely limited vision of a KGB man from that time. Remember when the Soviet Union collapses?
Yeah.
There's this weird and terrible thing, the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And what about the First World War, or the Second World War, or the Holocaust? I mean, the worst thing that happened was the collapse of this tyranny. It's nonsensical. But and the other thing is that when it collapsed, he was not inside the Soviet Union, but he was a secret policeman in Dresden, in Stasiland in East Germany. And he never, I think the Soviet Union collapsed because of 3 reasons. The first of which, the biggest and most important, was that the Soviet economy, the planned economy, couldn't possibly compete with the free Western market, and failed and was continuing to fail, couldn't pay for the new missiles to defend itself, couldn't pay for any good quality of life compared to the West. That's the big problem. Secondly, symbolizing the regime's failures was Chernobyl. And this was a nuclear disaster that happened twice. It first happened in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and they covered it up. There was a big leak of radiation, but it wasn't as bad as Chernobyl.
Yeah, but you see, they're trying it so hard, even to the sort of like 1st May parade. Even the top communist leaders with their children and wives went to the parade, where it shouldn't be going there because it's radiation and it was damaging health engine. But they were so desperate to hold it, to hide it.
Yes, they weren't living in truth. They weren't respecting or honouring reality. And the second big reason why the Soviet Union collapsed was Chernobyl, because it told people that the government has no interest, isn't bothered about your health and your care. And it was a system that covered up its mistakes. It didn't analyse them and look at them properly. And the third reason was the war in Afghanistan. And essentially there was no good purpose for this war. Afghanistan certainly wasn't threatening Russia. And 15,000 people died. Soviet soldiers, many more were wounded. By the way, these numbers are tiny compared to the numbers of Russians. I mean, one estimate is 800,000 Russians have been killed or maimed. Is that my phone or your phone?
Must be yours.
It's gone away.
John, I have to sort of like, before we carry on with the book, you have to know that you have faithful readers in Australia. And these are the people on my podcast who mentioned your book. I don't know why I missed during my New Year book recommendations. Why did I miss Killing in the Kremlin? Obviously, it wasn't on purpose. You know, it's one of my favorite books, and so many memories. And then other people picked up, and some of in Europe, I think in Sweden, and the buzz started about the Killing in the Kremlin. And now your readers and my audience or viewers in Australia, they're saying hello because it's good morning in Australia. So you can say good morning to Australia. And
good morning.
And also, you see, you one of many journalists who started being specialized on Russia or Putin, and then sort of like gradually gravitated in Ukraine, and now you sort of like get more Ukrainian context and historically, politically, culturally. And what I noticed, even those who now cover and war tirelessly in Ukraine, risking their lives, colleagues, journalists, they still have this Russia or Putin wants, or Russia's central narrative. But those journalists who go in straight to Ukraine, not having previous experience with Moscow, they don't subconsciously pick up this Russian central narratives or post-Soviet narratives of Moscow. Have you noticed it yourself? And the other thing, you know, like President Kuchma is the second Ukrainian president. He wrote the book saying Ukraine is not Russia. And do you see yourself that these are two different countries, two different cultures, two different mentalities, and it's 100% opposite to what Putin said? We are the same people. Ukraine is not existent, blah blah blah, or Ukraine was made up by Lenin. That kind of nonsense. Have you noticed yourself, and what's your discoveries, or your perspective is a bit different?
So I start. I'm fascinated by Russia from very early on. Fascinated by Russian history. I do Russian O-level at school, and I just scrape through. And then I go to LSE, and one of my teachers is Professor Leonard Shapiro, who says, as a small boy in St. Petersburg, I remember both revolutions, the one in February and then the one in October. The February one was quite exciting, but by the time the October one came along, revolutions were boring, and we all went back to playing cowboys and Indians. Really quite a bizarre moment. Look, he was very, very old when he taught us in 1977, but... so I would say that I visited Ukraine. I understood Ukraine a little bit, but not too much. I did write a novel called The Useful Idiot, which is about the Holodomor, fake news in 1933, how Stalin's wicked control of the media, the Western media, allowed the terrible man-made famine under Stalin's collectivization in 1933, in which maybe as many as 7 million Ukrainians died. Nobody knows because nobody counted, or nobody was allowed to count. But I've got a flavour of Ukraine, but I didn't really get it until I went to Ukraine just before the big invasion in 22 in February, and I stayed there. And to begin with, I think for the first year I used to do my little video diaries from Kyiv, and I would talk about Vladimir Putin's war. And then, after a fair amount of badgering by my Ukrainian pals, but also a sense of proper understanding by myself, in 23, January the 1st, it became Russia's war against Ukraine. Because it's not just Putin who's fighting this war. Now, I feel that there are far too many Russians who have been completely brainwashed by Kremlin propaganda. And they know that if you go against the Kremlin, you may die. And everybody is still afraid of Stalin's secret police.
Absolutely don't agree on that. Because if people don't agree with their leader, they kicked him out. He's resonating with them.
I was hurrying to get to the bars, but that's not enough. In that they haven't, ordinary Russians and the Russian opposition have not said enough and done enough to stand up to Russian fascism as it's shown itself in the way it's fought against Ukraine. And so I think there is something wrong with Russian soul, Russian identity, with Russian imperialism. It kind of feels like, from history, the Britons that believed that it would be wrong to give up India, for example, and if you give up India, then at some point you've got to give up the colonies in Africa, blah, 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 blah. But that was the big thing in the 30s. And Churchill, who was a great man in many other ways, was wrong about this. But it feels like that Russia is still living inside an imperialist mindset that the rest of us put aside, certainly in 1945. By the way, I'm old, but I'm not that old. I wasn't alive in 45. However, when I say that, then these strands continue. So you've now got Trump sort of playing the kind of Putinist card, I want Greenland. Well, Greenland belongs to somebody else.
Well, he called Canada 51st state, didn't he? With
yeah,
that picture.
I mean, you kind of. I went to Toronto recently.
Oh yes, I called you. You were in
Yeah,
Toronto.
because Killer in the Kremlin was shortlisted for the Peterson Literary Award, run by Yaroslav Trofimov quite properly. But nevertheless, I was shortlisted. And in my speech, we all had to do a little speech. And in my speech, I invited Canada to take back the United States. And I stand by that. I think before the Americans get going, come on, Canada. I mean, we've done it before. 1818, I think, 1812, I think it was. The Canadians and the British went south and we burned down the White House. Let's do it again. And I'm joking, obviously.
John.
But what's frustrating about this is we're democracies, Britain, America, Canada, Denmark, that owns Greenland, and we should do things democratically. And Trump seems to have forgotten that and is absorbing Putinism. It feels, I mean, the big hope was, with the fall of the Soviet Union, was that Russia would be would somehow by osmosis get freedom. And what's happened is the wrong way round, is that Russian corruption has poisoned the West far more effectively than Western democracy has liberated Russia and China. It's really depressing.
John, 2 more questions and then I'll let you go for your important event tonight. So before I ask the question I have for you, one of our viewers asking, can you ask him about what the security guard said to him when he punched him, when he was asking Vladimir Putin pertinent questions?
It was a good question, but what happened was, it was a couple of hours later when Putin was opening a gas pipeline junction, sending gas from Siberia into China. Now, actually, the pipeline hadn't been built. It was a PR stunt just for the junction. But nevertheless, it was Putin, the deputy vice premier of China. So it wasn't the same event. 3 hours passed, and the person who thumped me said nothing. Nothing was said.
The silence spoke volumes.
Yeah, exactly.
In your book, you have special sort of moments for the Red story. And why was significant looking into personality of Vladimir Putin and bringing up these memories of Putin and Reds and St. Petersburg in 50s, isn't it? 60s, 50s. So at that time, why it's so important?
So the Rat story is that he lives in a dirt poor part of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, in a working class apartment block of flats, very, very poor, rat infested. And as a young boy, what he used to do was try and kill rats with a stick. And at one point, he cornered a rat, and the rat attacked him. And from then on, and he writes this in his ghosted autobiography, One Person, which was published in 2000, when Russia, there was still some shafts of light inside Russia. And so it's more open and a better book than you would imagine, certainly that would be written today. But anyway, this thing about cornering the rat, and the takeaway that Putin got was, if you're under threat, attack first. So because Ukrainians or the Westerners are attacking you because the border is moving closer to Russia, the reason being that Lithuanians and the Estonians and Latvians and the Poles don't want to live inside some horrible Soviet nightmare. They want to live in their own countries, and therefore they join this defensive shield, NATO. That's the reason the NATO border goes east, not anything else. Anyway, this establishes aggression. But there's something else that's interesting as well. The most effective way of killing rats is not with a stick. It's poison. And I speculated in my book, but I think there's substantial evidence for this, that Vladimir Putin has a thing about poisoning his enemies. So Litvinenko said that he was a paedophile after this awful moment. Look it up on YouTube, you can see it on YouTube. Putin kisses boy on stomach. 2006, Putin kneels before a little boy, lifts up the shirt, kisses this 5-year-old boy, something like this, on his belly, and then pats him on his head and walks away. It's creepy as weird. Litvinenko says Putin is a paedophile. Now, I don't think this moment on its own is proof of that terrible allegation, but it is creepy, no question.
Yeah, but if the guy has the kind of faults, why Yeltsin would appoint him prime minister and then push him for presidency? If there's it's something wrong with the guy, it's not just pedophile. Closer, you can see many other faults.
Yes, but the reason why Yeltsin did that was because his family was corrupt, and they were in trouble. And then and Putin was the solution to the possibility that Skaratov, the prosecutor general, might start seriously troubling them. But to get to the point, what happened to Litvinenko was he was poisoned with polonium-210, which is manufactured in the Saratov nuclear reactor. So Putin eliminated Litvinenko, who he really hated as a traitor because he was KGB and then he became an enemy. He poisoned him with polonium-210. Skripal's a traitor. He was in the GRU. He goes and works for the British for MI6, and he's poisoned too. Putin likes poison. The reason I like the rat story is I think Putin's love of having his enemies poisoned starts with him fighting, struggling against rats in his rat-infested block of flats.
That's
my speculation, but I think there's good evidence he's got a thing about poison.
I totally agree with you, but think about it as the human and the rat. So rat would never, stand equally to any human who wants to attack or kill him. So maybe Putin is sort of like can attack only when he knows that he won't get a punch back. For example, Georgia, Chechnya, Ukraine. He would never go against China or America. So you see, it's kind of like small victorious war for a weak or smaller country. But I think he got very wrong with Ukraine. He will choke on it.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, I feel very, very worried. I hurt my leg. I fell over on black ice last December, and I've still got a bad limp. I can't run, and with these drones, that's not a good thing. But I'm hoping to go back to Ukraine in the new soon. But we haven't done the West, and it's to our shame. We haven't done enough to give the Ukrainians enough stuff to combat Russian fascism. We haven't. We need to do so.
But Ukraine carry on creating miracles.
Yes, it is the technological, the energy, the intellectual and moral and physical energy of Ukraine is amazing. They are changing the nature of warfare as we speak. They have pioneered drone warfare, and they're absolutely brilliant at it. And one of the reasons why the Russians are not, pulverizing Ukraine, although it's hard, and too many wonderful Ukrainian boys and girls, men and women, are being killed. But nevertheless, Ukrainians are, in particular for these first-person control videos, through drones, they are making Russia pay an incredible price in blood. The problem is Putin doesn't care. And one just hopes at some point that ordinary Russians will wake up to the fact that they're being led to slaughter by a madman.
Interesting. John, recently happened, what I like about newsfeed, on news happening, sometimes you don't expect good news, and my new year started with this tremendous, unbelievable operation conducted by Group 13. Their commander was recently on the podcast, and they using sea drones took down 3 Russian helicopters on the Black Sea. 2 crashed and 1 damaged, but managed to land in. Do you have your own moments which just like makes you yes, or give you this light at the end of the tunnel in this horrible war, Russian war in Ukraine?
It's such a difficult question because
just one moment.
Okay, so one moment. So in Bakhmut in August 22, I'm in a trench in Bakhmut with Vladimir Demchenko, who arrested me on day 2.
Yeah, because you're a spy.
Yeah,
and then you had cup of tea at Ukrainian Secret Service.
And I was, anyway, we had a big argument, but he had a machine gun, and so he won the argument for that moment. Anyway, we worked it out, and we're there, and it's a quiet day. I keep on saying it's very quiet, and Demchenko goes, "Shut up! Don't say that. Don't ever say it's quiet, because if you do, then it means that it's bad karma to say very quiet." Anyway, but what happened was somebody made me a cup of tea, and I'm wearing my flat jacket and helmets, and as everybody else is, somebody makes me a cup of tea, And I'm sitting in this trench, and it feels like 1914, 18. People crack jokes. And on the tea I've got, the cup, it says in Ukrainian, best Ukrainian grandma. And Vladimchenko translate this. And Chris Okichoni, who's this wonderful photographer from New York, who did this fantastic pictures in Irpin of the lady with the dogs. Do you remember that picture of the lady? She's got 7 dogs on lead, who she's rescuing.
Yeah.
And it's a dark, dark sky. And it's a symbol of Ukrainian courage. Anyway, Chris Okichoni, he's there, and he's got a wonderful sense of humour. And the moment said, hey, John, the mug you're drinking, it said, best Ukrainian grandma. And Chris goes, hey, John, you can be a grandma if you want to be. That's why Ukraine is fighting this war. And we collapsed in giggles, and the Russians are a mile away. And this is, for me, it bottles the spirit of Ukrainian resistance, which is so beautiful and so funny and so good. And that is why I support Ukraine. And that is why I say God save
You support Ukraine because Ukraine has delicious food and good wine. Let's face
and
the truth.
It does, but so does France. I mean, I support France and Italy for the same. But Ukraine is fighting Russian fascism with a tremendous spirit. And it kind of, when I'm in, certainly those moments when I'm in Kyiv, people crack jokes during the Battle of Kyiv. You know, it was incredibly tense. At one point, the Russian army was 12 miles from the center. But people would crack really funny jokes, dark, dark sense of humour. And it felt a bit like what I read about London in 1940, being bombed, you know, during the Blitz, being bombed by the Nazis. And yet people had a wonderful sense of humour.
Would you like to go back and experience it again, those days when Kyiv was surrounded? And this concentration of Ukrainian identity, humour and fighting spirit?
Well, in a funny way, I'm writing a novel at the moment about that very moment, and so part of me is back there. I mean, you dragged me away.
Is there a love story, John?
I'm gonna have to write it, and you're gonna have to read it.
Well, of course I will. And we will have another interview.
and the people in Australia and everything like that, yeah. But
One line. Why people should read your book?
Sorry?
Why people should read your book? Just
because
7 words.
People should understand that Vladimir Putin is not a normal politician you can negotiate with. There are far too many people, so Macron to begin with and Scholz. And to an extent, the Americans think if all we have to do is give him a little bit and it'll be fine, it'll go away. He's not like that. He's a psychopathic killer. Killer in the Kremlin, that's what he is. And you've got to treat him as a killer. The only language he understands is violence, and you have to smash him to the ground and defeat him. Now, we're not doing the fighting. The Ukrainians understand that, but we need to give the Ukrainians stuff to enable them to do that, and we need to build up our defences seriously and quickly.
Absolutely. John, thank you very, very much. I'm letting you go. Thank you for joining, and the pleasure talking to you and rereading book again.
I'm trying to find the thumb again.
Enjoy your Polish food tonight?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Okay, enjoy.
But there we go. I go there because they won't poison me. Cross.
And remember Ukrainian wine in Lidl.
Yeah, will do. I'm campaigning for Waitrose to bring it in immediately.
Oh, that's so hard. Okay, enjoy your evening and talk to you soon, and thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for listening.
Yes.
Support Ukraine.
Bye, John.
Bye.
Well, you had, hopefully that was fascinating, interesting, and enjoyable. for you to listen to John's stories, and he shared his insight into Trump, Elon Musk, and of course we discussed the book. I have an impression when this book came out, and I felt like the podcast about poisoning, we worked with John together, and it was exciting process of working. That was fascinating. There was a great team of people, and there was sort of like, the strong feeling like the magic is happening. And I thought it's actually when the book came out that this was sort of based on that. But when obviously the full-scale invasion, and if you haven't read the book, I'm not going to spoil, but there's sort of, it's as you go along, the history is in the making in the book. And now talking to John about the book, discussing it with you and sharing my opinion, I think this book will be updated, or there should be like the second part going on, because he hasn't stopped killing. Putin is the mass murderer, and he's just changing tools, approach. You can see some signature moments of him. I just can't, as a person, as an individual, I can't comprehend the number of people who suffered and died from Putin's doing, decision and everything. But I have to say, it's not just, it's my opinion, I don't think Putin is the one to blame, because the community of people gets the leader who resonates with them. If the Russian people were not happy with Putin, or the majority of them didn't feel strongly about his narratives, his priorities and everything else, he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be sitting in the Kremlin, but he's still there. And this is sort of like, this is the Russia's choice. Yeah, he has his tools and tightening legislation and life for the people in Russia getting worse. It's actually their choice, because his presence depends on them. That's purely my opinion, yeah, see what you think. You can ask questions or share your opinions. I'm still here. Someone says, had some Odessa vodka. Oh, in Sainsbury's. Oh, I don't drink vodka, but I definitely will go and get some. I can't believe. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the tips. Those who watching me and watched John in the UK, just repeat, some of the girls on social media posted there's Ukrainian wine in Lidl. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not sort of like, but if you do, if you'd like to try and see what you think, and check it out. Any more questions or comments, I would be happy to answer and reply. I hope our Australian friends heard good morning from John, and it's actually, I mentioned it to John, those who missed, I just say the idea talk live about this book, Killing the Kremlin, came up actually in the comments of under my video about New Year and book recommendations, when the Australians mentioned like, oh, this book you haven't mentioned and it's really good one. And then there was picked up and so on and so forth. So Australia, thank you for inspiring, and thank you for all your support from the previous interviews and videos and comments and your feedback. Some of you sent in emails, which I'm happily reply. And thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. Thank you for finding time to interested and actually engage. It means the world to Ukrainians, to the people in Ukraine. And it's not only soldiers. It's not, recently I had messages from one of the mothers. Her son was defending Mariupol, and he was taken in captivity. It's almost soon going to be 3 years he's in captivity. As far as she knows, he's alive. And it's so difficult and complicated, this exchanging prisoners process. So people like that, who is overwhelmed with their own grief and their problems and everything, and they know that somebody in Germany, USA, Canada, Australia thinking of Ukraine, supporting and sending good words means a lot. Thank you. And thank you for supporting my podcast channel. The plan is to make a part of interviews on Sunday. I'm going to be doing live streams, I think probably on Mondays or something. I'll be answering the questions on the a feedback on the video posted on Sunday, but I'll keep you posted. And the other one is probably Wednesday or Thursday. We will be talking more about current events, some statements, something I would like to discuss with you or show you. So we'll see how it goes. I'm very happy to have this amazing community. Thank you. Let's have a look. Any more questions? Героям слава. Звичайно, героям слава. Слава Україні. Oh, thank you. I'm safe. For those who doesn't know, I don't live in Ukraine. I moved to the UK in 2011, but since the war broke, I go regularly there. So I'm pretty safe. I'm in London with my family. So yeah, but many of my friends, my big family is in Ukraine, and lots of my colleagues. So it's painful. It's terrifying for them. Thank you for your kind words and support. Okay. I like your discussion in the comments. Have a good evening. Have a cup of tea. Have a slice of cake or something nice, and have very good rest. For those who working or just got up in Australia, have a fantastic day, full of energy, inspiration, and good people. Take care. Bye.